upcoming webinars that we have for the Women in Technology webinar. In May, Lynn Langett is going to present her Teaching Kids Programming courseware. It's to help you teach kids ages 10 through 17 technology. So we're really excited to have her. Very different program than we presented last month with Tech Girls, but as successful, if not more so. Upcoming also the Professional Development Virtual Chapter, Mickey Stewie is doing a presentation later this month, specifically on being a role model for women in tech through blogging. We talk a lot on our WIT page about supporting other women, supporting the women that you work with in tech, and Mickey's going to present a session on how she's managed to do that. And a lot of you that are on the webinar today know Mickey personally. She's a fantastic instructor, so it's going to be a great session to attend. The first week of April, Erin Stellato, Kicking and Screaming, Replacing Profiler with Extended Events. In May, Jess Borland, again, DBA Fundamentals Virtual Chapter, May the 3rd, Beyond CX Packet, Understanding Weight Statistics. And I am missing a slide because there's another one coming up, but I guess I don't have it today. So, Haz, if you're ready, I can go ahead and turn this over to you. Are you ready to go? There we go. Okay, you should have the option to take it and get started. So thanks very much for doing this today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Hello, everybody. Let me make sure you can hear me. All right, there we go. I'm going to do a quick sound check again because I have some video playing, so I've got to make sure that'll work. Okay, sounds like that works. All right, hi everybody. My name is Haz Parakrama. You did a good job, Barry. It's a tough name. No worries. I'm a senior application developer with UMB, and today I'll be talking about gender inequality in STEM and leadership. And a lot of my material I actually borrowed a lot of research done by these trailblazing women here. Dr. Jennifer Whelan is the founder and director of Synapse Psychometrics, and she's a research fellow at Melbourne Business School. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Sheryl Sandberg. She's the COO of Facebook. And Professor Shelley Carell, she's a professor of sociology at Stanford University. And so throughout this presentation, you're going to see videos of them presenting their research and their kind of opinions on gender inequality in STEM and leadership. So what we have here is, I'm going to start us off by looking at STEM degrees that have been awarded from 1966 to 2012. And this is data from the U.S. Department of Labor. You see the solid lines here are bachelor's degrees awarded, the dashed lines are master's, and the dotted lines are PhDs. And the orange is for men, and the green line is for women. And so what we can see is kind of what we expect from where we are, which is that a lot more men are going into STEM and graduating with STEM degrees, significantly more than women. So the big question is, so is this a big deal? And this actually is quite of a problem. In 2012, the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Tech published a report that forecasts that 1 million more STEM graduates will be needed to fill job openings and the technology needs of the country by 2022. And simply by increasing STEM retention by 10% will generate 3/4 of this, and currently we have an attrition rate of women going into STEM degrees and then leaving them at about 25%. So from an organizational standpoint, this is also a problem because studies have pretty consistently shown that more diverse organizations make better decisions. If you have diversity, you get more opinions, more different ways of thinking, and it allows you to be creative and adapt to new situations. And an interesting result from these studies is that you can also show correlation that less diverse organizations make worse decisions, but they actually believe that they're good, which is pretty interesting. At a national level, obviously the U.S. becomes less competitive in STEM as gender inequality is growing across the rest of the Western world and more women are going into technology. The U.S. is not going to be able to keep up, and those countries will get ahead of us. And just in the big picture, it's just less technological advancements for humanity. There's going to be less smart people working on really important things in technology. And what I'm going to show now is just some opinions by some people who are at Stanford as part of a mini documentary called She++, and some also words from Sheryl Sandberg. So let's take a listen.
And at this rate, literally the growth of the U.S. tech industry is going to be throttled by the fact that U.S. universities and even the world's universities are not producing enough software engineers.
In the West, we cut our scientific population in half because we don't really encourage women. We need everyone we can get in this field. If Stanford graduated all of its students in computer science, the Valley would hire them all.
If you are the manager, if John Chambers at Cisco makes Cisco a better place to work for women, he's going to have a competitive advantage recruiting 50% of the population. I talked to him today, that's what he said. So I want to be great at this because it's going to make my company better.
All right, so where does that put us? At 2014, women made up 57% of the entire U.S. labor workforce. And unfortunately, it was a very small percentage in the STEM area, as you can see here. 39% in chemists, 25% in CS and math, 15% in chem, and 8% in electrical. So we need better participation, and we need to encourage women to go into these fields. And the big question that kind of starts out is, why so few? Is this just the nature of the field, that women don't want to do this kind of work and go into these kinds of fields? That's obviously not true. And for the rest of this talk, we're going to go over these properties, if you will, as to why STEM is not an appealing field for women. Basically, it's become a boys' club. And because of gender stereotypes, there's been a lack of encouragement from parents and teachers and peers. There's a lack of female role models, and these gender stereotypes are pervasive throughout society, and they begin at a very young age. And all of this is due to kind of the big elephant in the room, which is unconscious gender bias, which is something that is going to be very difficult to tackle, and we're going to go over that in this talk. So let's take a step back and see kind of how we got here in the first place. Historically, gender roles kept women from science. Now we do have some exceptional examples like Ada Lovelace, Marie Curie, Margaret Hamilton, and Sally Ride. And the problem is that they were few and far in between. They were exceptional, but by and large, men were the scientists. And when World War II was going on, there was a shortage of men because they were going off to fight. And so that prompted training of women to do these kinds of scientific tasks. And so, for example, ENIAC actually had 6 female computer programmers, and they were kind of seen as the original real computer programmers. And in the 1960s, because of that, there was an explosion of female computer programmers. I mean, it was actually seen as a very good field for women to go into. But interestingly enough, it was because the industry kind of saw it as clerical work. It was easy. It was kind of secretary work, computer programming. And what happened is that once the industry realized that this was actually tough work and it required a lot of smarts, suddenly the field became more of a, well, this is more appropriate for men. And as more men started to go into the field, they formed professional organizations, and within the companies that they were working for, they did what they could to discourage hiring women. And we also had the industry actually releasing ads that link female programmers to inefficiency. So this is an example for a scanning machine, and instead of saying we can replace your workers with one machine, they go ahead and say, well, it has 16 legs, 8 waggly tongues, and costs you at least 40 grand a year. So not only are they just demeaning women in general, they're also reducing them to just bodies, to sexual objects. And when the 1980s happened, the rise of the personal computer was really kind of what people would agree is the tipping point to where girls just stopped getting into computer science and engineering. And these personal computers were targeted to boys and men. So what I'm going to show you now are two ads. One is for the Commodore 64, and another is for a personal computer from Radio Shack. And see if you can pick out where the women are or the girls and kind of how they fit into this.
Are you keeping up with the Commodore? Because the Commodore is keeping up with you. Are you keeping up with the Commodore? Because the Commodore is keeping up with you. Are you keeping up? Because the Commodore is keeping up with you. Are you keeping up? Because the Commodore is keeping up with you. In a world that's full of make-believe and changing attitudes. Are you keeping up with the Commodore? Because the Commodore is keeping up with you. Are you keeping up with the Commodore? Because the Commodore is keeping up with you.
Some people have big plans after school. You know what Elliot's going to do? Jeff, too. Elliot's at work on a book report using Scripsit on Radio Shack's Color Computer 3. It hooks up to his TV. And Jeff's at his Radio Shack Color Computer 3 playing the newest football game. But wait, what's Elliot doing playing New Super Pitfall? And Jeff's having a blast with a new math tutor. You never know what you might try with more than 100 programs for fun and learning. Radio Shack's Color Computer 3 comes with everything you see here. Other items each sold separately. Only at Radio Shack.
So obviously women are just good for swimming, I guess, and men can use the technology. So this is a graph of math and CS degrees awarded. This is also from the U.S. Department of Labor. And this is an interesting data set because it shows in the same way you got the solid line as bachelor's and master's and PhDs. But if we look at what happened in the 1980s after the personal computer came out, there was an explosion, both for men and women, going into math and CS. But in the 80s, as PCs were starting to become prevalent, suddenly both degrees started to fall, and as the economy caught back up again, and probably up here in the 2000s, this is during the recession, women kind of peaked in the 1980s as far as math and CS, as you can see here. In the 2000s, they caught back up, and then they dropped down again. And meanwhile, men for math and CS, they kept on going. So this had a kind of side effect, I suppose, in that because men were very prevalent in the field of STEM, it led to this idea that STEM is for men and this notion of geeks being for men. And these stereotypes came about as well, which is that, you know, if you're in STEM, you're probably antisocial. If you're a computer programmer, you're probably in the basement somewhere. And it's socially ostracizing. So let's take a look at some Stanford students talking about that.
So I think a big thing that deters a lot of girls and a lot of women from pursuing CS is the image that the computer scientist is this, you know, like bad hygiene person who has, you know, this pocket calculator.
Who are very antisocial.
Maybe just very sedentary and are going to spend their time coding alone at home.
All the lights turned off, listening to music, drinking some kind of energy drink.
Not a very appealing image for a lot of people.
There's no reason it has to be that way.
And these stereotypes still exist today. I mean, in 1984, you had kind of Revenge of the Nerds, and even today, as of 2015, even 2016, shows like The Big Bang Theory kind of emphasize that this is kind of a boys' thing, and it's for boys, and not only is it for men and boys, but it's also socially ostracizing, and it's not a great place to be from a social standpoint. So that would turn off a lot of girls from doing it. So where does that leave us today? STEM is still a boys' club. Gender imbalance leads to enforcement of gender stereotypes, and these gender stereotypes lead to sexism. Now, when I say sexism, I'm not talking about the sexism that we all can hopefully recognize right off the bat. So I'm going to play you a video of what I hope everyone would recognize as just flat-out overt sexism.
The big picture here is women do earn less in America because they choose to. They would rather go to their daughter's piano recital than stay all night at work working on a proposal.
What?
So they end up earning less. They're less ambitious. And I think this is sort of God's way. This is nature's way of saying women should be at home with the kids. They're happier there. Most women are happier at home. They are pretending that they like working, and they're not making money because they don't stay all night at the office. They don't go the extra mile. They don't work all weekend. You're making a mistake. You would be much happier at home with a husband and children.
Oh, boy.
So if you guys missed that, that douchebag was basically saying that he can speak on behalf of women, and I hope everyone knows that he can't. So that's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about when I say sexism is actually really challenging, and that's the sexism that's subtle, and it's sexism that everyone has, and that's what we mean by unconscious gender bias. So that's going to be kind of the focus of this talk, and it's a very difficult problem to solve. So what is unconscious gender bias? Well, long story short, it's a gender bias that society has all around the world. It's not just the U.S., where women are put into a category and men are put into a category, and they have characteristics that are kind of recognized as feminine, or characteristics that fit women and characteristics that fit men. And basically, women are seen as kind of the warm, caring, nurturing, and men are seen as competent, dominant, and powerful. Those are sort of the characteristics we're talking about. And the problem is, from these characteristics, you can extrapolate other characteristics. So, for example, with being warm, caring, and nurturing, characteristics of being timid and subservient and simple, routine, doing the same stuff, not really going out of your comfort zone, these are things that kind of have been expected of women. If you want to be ladylike or if you want to be a proper woman, these are characteristics that society recognizes and are familiar with. And by contrast, for men, this idea of being confident, this idea of being a leader, they fit our stereotypes. If a man acts in a leaderly way, it doesn't clash with our own ideas of the way a man is supposed to act. And with these characteristics are also ones that are really important to STEM, which is that kind of curious explore and discovery, this idea of thinking outside the box and rebelling against the rules, things that I think are really crucial for being a good computer scientist or an engineer. You have to be curious and explore nature. These characteristics are predominantly associated with being a boy or a man. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go over kind of the path of a girl going into a woman, exploring the STEM field and going into leadership. And we'll start at youth. So when a girl is very young, we're all familiar with these kinds of things. Girls are inundated with toys like My Little Ponies and kitchen sets and all the things that fit the stereotype of what a girl and a woman should be. Whereas boys get engineering sets and Legos, and they get to build cool stuff, and they get to dress up as doctors and whatnot, and chemists. The image on the right here is a fun one. It's for a store called Tesco. This girl wanted to get a Marvel superhero clock, and this image went viral because the sign says it's for boys. And as soon as that image went viral, Tesco took that sign down, which is good. But even as, oh, I forgot I have a video here. Let's take a look at something that Barbie did.
Barbie. Some outrage over a book called Barbie, I Can Be a Computer Engineer.
The book starts with Barbie designing a computer game, but she quickly gets into trouble, a virus crashing her laptop. Her solution? Bring in the boys. It will go faster if Brian and I help, says Stephen. Barbie's reply? Great. The boys fix the problem. The book getting tons of attention online. One writing, thank you, Barbie, for showing me that it's A-okay for women to sit back and let men take care of everything.
So that was an interesting one because it was kind of Mattel and Barbie sort of exploring the idea of girls going into engineering and computer science, but even in their best efforts, they still had to show that men are the ones who really do it. And then as girls get older and they go into their teen years, we still inundate them with these expectations that they're not supposed to be good at STEM and leadership. And so, for example, this shirt on the right says, I'm too pretty to do my homework, so my brother has to do it for me. So what kind of impact does this have if we inundate young girls with these kinds of ideas? They're told by parents and teachers that STEM is for boys, so obviously enough of those kinds of enough of that kind of feedback will deter girls from pursuing it. And as a result, they're also encouraged to participate in non-STEM activities. When they're in school, they might be encouraged to do something like dance or art, which is fine, but it doesn't give them the chance to explore STEM, which they actually might be interested in. So let's say that a girl makes it through that young, awkward stage where they actually get past those gender stereotypes and they really do want to pursue STEM, and they want to go into college. So let's take a look at the problems that they now face once they get in.
In school at Stanford, they do a reasonable job, but I was still the only girl in a couple of my classes. We're not talking classes of 20, we're talking classes of 120.
Everybody knows who those women are, which has got to be way too much pressure on them.
All the prejudices and the implicit notions that if you're a girl, you're going to do less well.
And I think a lot of women, myself included, come to computer science afraid of it.
It was just very intimidating to be around these people who could just hack out code really fast, and I was just struggling to write my first, Hello World program.
So that's another problem, is that by the time these girls, if they were really interested or they become interested into computer science or STEM, the boys have already got a significant head start because they had been doing it during their younger years. So let's say they get past college and they make it through, they get their degree, they really want to do this, and now they want to get hired. And this is actually not STEM specific, this is industry wide, the kind of obstacles that women face just from unconscious gender bias. So there have been a lot of studies on this, and we're going to take a look at 3 of them. In 1999, there was a study where it was for an assistant professor position. And what they did was they sent out 2 resumes, exactly the same credentials. They were identical resumes. They sent it to 2 groups of people to decide whether or not they would hire them. And one group of people got Brian Miller, and one group got Karen Miller. And these were identical. And as you can imagine, they chose 79% of them preferred to hiring Brian Miller to 49% Karen Miller, which is a pretty striking difference. And not only was there, were they less likely to hire Karen Miller, they also said things like they scrutinized Karen Miller's resume a lot more. They said things like, I would need to see evidence that she had gotten these grants and publications on her own. It would be impossible to make such a judgment without teaching evaluations. They didn't do that kind of scrutiny for Brian Miller's resume. Another study that was done was for a lab manager position, and this was a study done by the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 2012. 2 identical resumes, one with a man's name, one with a woman's name. It was sent to both male and female faculty groups, and like the previous study, the female candidate was rated worse, as less competent, hireable, less favorable to receive mentoring, and even was recommended a lower salary, even though they were identical. And a third study that we'll look at is a 2005 study. This is for police chiefs. And so what they did was they had 2 resumes. They were different. One had more education and one had more experience. And so they sent these out to 2 groups of people, and they sent these out to a group of people. And they said, you know what, the education is what matters. So they favored education. Then what they did was they attached names to them. Brian Miller had more education and Karen Miller had more experience. And the second group of people looked at it and said, no, we still think education is more important for this job. So that's fine. They're consistent. And as you can imagine, what happened next was they swapped Brian Miller to now have more experience and Karen Miller to have more education. They sent that out to a third group of people, and they recommended Brian Miller. And the reason that they cited was because he had more experience. So the takeaway from this is everyone does it. I still do it. Everyone does it. It's unconscious. It's something that we've kind of had hammered into our psyche ever since we were little, and it's a very challenging thing to break away from. So let's say that as a woman you finally get hired and you get into the workplace. And again, this is not STEM related. This is across industries. What kind of obstacles do women face because of unconscious gender bias? Well, in the workplace, because of this kind of bias, there have been studies that show that women are less influential. their suggestions are less likely to be considered. And as a result, their contributions are less recognized. A good example is like if a woman goes above and beyond her job duties, it's kind of seen as, well, she's just doing her job, whereas a man would be more recognized for, doing more than necessary. And of course, there's a wage gap. Women are less rewarded, and they're also less rewarded in terms of credit. A funny comic here is this boardroom with one woman. That's an excellent suggestion, Miss Triggs. Perhaps one of the men here would like to make it. I always like that. Interestingly, organizations that pride themselves in being meritocratic, whereas performance-based, even in those organizations, women have to overperform men to get the same performance rating. And interestingly enough, some organizations that actually pride themselves, they show the most bias. There was a study that displayed this. So let's say you're a woman now, you're in the workplace, you've been trudging along and you want to get promoted, you want the next responsibility. How does unconscious gender bias affect you in terms of advancing your career? Well, women as leaders, going back to one of the earlier slides, it contradicts our stereotypes. And it goes from, if a woman wants to assert her leadership, she might come off as abrasive or rude, or because it just doesn't fit what we expect of women. And this starts at a very young age, where girls are called bossy when they exhibit leadership qualities.
Men only, please, men only. Raise your hand if anyone's ever called you when you were a child bossy. Men only. There's always a few. Women, raise your hand if you were called bossy as a little girl. Bossy is a super interesting word. We don't use it for little boys because when a little boy leads, it's expected, but when a little girl leads, it's not. So what can you do? What's the bias interrupter? This one. And this weekend, go to a playground. Someone will call a little girl bossy, probably her parents. You walk up with a big smile. You say, that little girl's not bossy. That little girl has executive leadership skills.
So as a result, when seeking career advancement, women sometimes don't actually pursue it because of all this unconscious gender bias that they face their whole lives. They lack the self-confidence. They've constantly been told, that this is for men to do because of these gender stereotypes. And even some women lack confidence in an organization's capability to support their career growth, which is another reason why they might not actually pursue new positions or promotions. And one of the biggest deterrents for senior women going into leadership is their decision to have a family. So let's take a listen to what Sheryl Sandberg and Jennifer Whelan have to say about it.
So the question, of course, is where do the women go once they hit mid-level management? Certainly there are structural and systemic barriers that women face at that point in their career, because mid-level of your career is also when you are most likely to be starting a family for women, right? So the two coincide.
Raise your hand if you didn't stand up, because it's really hard to have those big jobs and be a good parent. Can't do it. Never see your kids, impossible. Peggy Orenstein, who wrote Cinderella Ate My Daughter, a book so many of us are familiar with, she had a friend who came to her and said that her daughter said, I have a problem, Mommy. And she said, what's the problem? And she said, well, I want to be an astronaut. Her daughter's in kindergarten. And the boy I like wants to be an astronaut. Mother said, well, great. And she said, oh, no, Mommy. Who's going to watch our kids when we're in space? I think it will have to be me. She's in kindergarten. The sad news is she's right. Because from my mother's generation to mine, we've made more progress in the workforce in many ways than we've made in the home. We still expect women to do the majority of childcare and housework, even though most women who are mothers in this country work full-time.
And that's something that I noticed throughout my career is I've never heard a father being asked in the workplace that question of like, how do you do it? How do you juggle both a family and a career. It's kind of expected. If you're a dad, you work. If you're a man, you work, and you just happen to have kids. But I know women get asked that question a lot, and especially if they think about having a family, they're asked that question, ooh, are you sure? You sure you want to do this now? Or if they have a family and they want to go into the workplace, they're told, I don't know, you can't have it all. And I never hear that going the other way. From an organizational standpoint, some companies are unwilling to support part-time or work from home. And in the area of computer science, I mean, it's 2016. Working from home should be pretty easy to do. And so even if women are mothers and they need to stay at home for whatever reason, some companies should be willing to work with that. And this is kind of a national thing too, the lack of family paid leave, not just maternity, but also paternity, so that fathers can stay at home if they have a newborn child for a couple of weeks. Some organizations don't do a really great job in supporting that. And this is a real problem for poor mothers and lower middle class, especially mothers working multiple jobs, that the notion that, you know, if you have a newborn or even just if you have a child and the child is sick, you have to make a decision on whether or not you can stay at home and care for that child or lose your job. And for men, interestingly, there are some systemic barriers as well. There's, you know, if you're a man and you want to stand up for women against gender inequality and against these gender stereotypes, if you're in a group full of men who may be exhibiting these qualities, you got to decide, okay, do I want to be that guy to, you know, make everything seem a little awkward by pointing out gender bias? And you can destroy relationships or at least sever some relationships with your peers and superiors. And there are also, you know, career stifling consequences that you might be afraid of. You might not get the promotion because you're making too much noise. So what can we do? We'll start with what women can do, and I'm definitely not going to be somebody who's going to tell women what to do under these circumstances. But Shelley Carell has some what she calls survival skills, and we'll go over them. And this is kind of what she pitches as some things women might want to consider. We'll go over these one by one. One is to be sure others notice your accomplishment. Self-promote. Toot your own horn. You know, let people know when you've done something. And be confident. Negotiate. Speak up at meetings. Don't just be silent. Volunteer for leadership positions. Don't wait for an opportunity to land on your desk. If there's an opening for a position you want, go out there and get it. And this is one that I don't like, and whenever I give this talk, it causes a lot of cringes in the audience. But she says that some organizations, depending on who you're working with, depending on your coworkers, the idea of a woman having children has negative connotations, that maybe she's not going to be 100% invested in her work. And so Professor Carell says maybe don't draw attention to them. I don't like that myself because obviously you shouldn't have to hide the fact that you're a mother. But again, these are survival skills, and I hate that women might have to consider this, but it's just an option. And unfortunately now, obviously, all of these things sound very inspirational, but they do have negative consequences.
And so let me show you a study that shows this. This study comes from psychologist Lori Redmond's work. Well, what she finds is that self-promoting works. For both men and women, the more they self-promote, the more confident they're seen in their job interview process. However, women who self-promote were also seen as being less likable. People didn't like the woman who self-promoted. They didn't mind the man who self-promoted, but they didn't like the woman who self-promoted.
So this notion of likability, some women, as Professor Carell says, they say, well, I don't care about being liked. But as she says, likability does matter, especially if you're trying to get a job or you're trying to get promoted. And so some other survival skills in order to stay likable is to be relentlessly positive, not just regularly positive, but relentlessly, always keep a good attitude. Expressing group-oriented motivations. So by that I mean say things like, we should do this instead of I think we should do this. Use humor. So I guess if you're not funny, you're screwed. No, but if you can somehow, make things lighthearted, even when exhibiting leadership qualities, maybe you'll be better received. And this notion of push forward, pull back is another thing that she talks about, where you're basically testing the waters. You show leadership, you be assertive, you be aggressive, and then you pull back, and you kind of survey the impact that that had. And then you go again, you push forward, you be assertive, and then you pull back. And I feel terrible just saying that this is something women have to consider, because it shouldn't be. If you are good at your job and you have leadership qualities, people should just be okay with that. And it's easy for me to say that, though. So,
I believe that if you think you might want to stay in the workforce, we need to teach women to start out aiming high. You can always take a step back. That option will always be open to you. If you are a young woman and you have not picked a partner, that decision will determine more of your career than anything else you do. There are no senior women who have partners, and almost all senior women do have partners, who don't have really supportive partners. And without it, you will not stay in. And if you will stay in, you will not achieve what you want to achieve. And so, it ruins a date. So maybe not on the first one, but a nice conversation on the division of labor. Have it early. Now, again, if it's a woman, you don't have to have it because it's all going to be fine. Just enjoy your date. But if it's a man, have that conversation early and often. And if he doesn't want to have it, go on a date with someone else. It's really actually the most important thing.
So let that be a lesson to any single men listening to this talk. So let's sum up. What women can do: self-promote with positivity, lean in, raise awareness of gender bias. That's a difficult thing to do because it obviously makes people feel awkward and uncomfortable. But maybe in subtle ways, point out some gender biases that you witness. Aiming high. And another important one is to be role models to younger girls. If younger girls see, when they look up and they see leadership and they see other women, it won't be strange to them to see women in leadership roles. There's some great organizations that you can also be a part of. I listed some of them here. And of course, if you want a partner, make sure that he or she will share the housework so you're not stuck doing all of that. So what can men do? It's kind of on similar grounds. Raising awareness of gender bias, of course. Supporting female peers. And that's also in the realm of mentorship. So, if you have a female coworker, take the initiative to make sure that she, is up to date with the latest technologies or processes, whatever she needs to know to stay on par with everyone else. And of course, recognition. If she does something, if you have female coworkers who go above and beyond their duties, take the time to publicly recognize them. Let everyone know when they do something great. Challenging male superiors on criticism of female employees is another one that's awkward, but it's important to do. So if you have superiors thinking about promoting someone, for example, and they have criticism saying, well, yeah, she's great, but she's a little too, aggressive or whatnot, stand up against that crap. I mean, just point out that, point out maybe a male coworker and say, well, he's also aggressive. Do you think the same about him? That sort of thing. If there's a note-taking situation, it's kind of expected sometimes that women take notes. Be somebody who takes notes instead and tell your female coworkers, I got this, you participate. If you have a female partner, share their housework with her. And these other organizations, there's a He for She, which is a really great United Nations organization that I'm very proud to be a part of. I encourage everyone to join it. And then, of course, you can take the implicit project test, which is really great. It's a Harvard test, and it tests not only gender bias, but also racial bias and others. You might learn something really interesting about yourself. And then what organizations can do, I've been told that some things that women really appreciate is if an organization expresses to female employees that their decision to have a family will not impact their careers, that can go a long way to have that conversation. And to tell women, if you decide to have a family, don't worry. We're going to do whatever we can to transition you in and out of maternity leave, and you don't have to worry about a thing. Apparently, that can go a long way. support part-time opportunities and paid family leave and work-from-home opportunities. And maybe even encourage blind hiring practices. If you need to hire for a position, have HR remove the names from those resumes and consider based on credentials. And this is also not just a gender thing, but also racial, because studies have shown that people with black-sounding names or Latino-sounding names are less likely to be brought in for an interview. And you can also have your employees, this could even be kind of fun, take the implicit project test, and maybe in a team setting you can all together learn something about yourselves when it comes to biases. And of course, supporting organizations. So let's go over some progress. There's been some great progress being made over the last couple of years. I think it was last year or maybe the year before, Target decided to go gender neutral in the toy department. So let's take a look at that.
This is what's happening. It'll be something you probably hardly notice, but again, putting this kind of background instead of pinks and blues, putting all the girls' and boys' toys all together so they're just toys for kids.
So that's great. But of course there's some people who just cannot handle that. I mean, they cannot function in society that way. Watch.
Now you have to sit there and look at a blended area and wonder, is this for a boy or is this for a girl?
I think what they're saying is the boundaries are down. Boys and girls can play with the same toys now.
Fantastic. There's going to be some unhappy girls and unhappy boys now.
He's like Santa Claus. He just cares about the kids' happinesses. There was a new Barbie advertisement last year, which it did a great job. We'll take a look at a snippet of it real quick.
Hello, my name is Gwyneth, and I'll be your professor today. And I will be talking about the brain. Hello, I'm your veterinarian today. Nope, I'm Dr. Brooklyn. See?
Okay, doctor.
Oh, here, let me see. Good morning, everyone. I'm your new coach. My name is Maddie. Nice to meet you. We can think and do lots of stuff with our brain. Now, does anybody know how big the brain is? Anybody? Sophia. It is medium. Medium? Very good.
Now, when I gave this talk last year, I had a joke, which was, well, Barbie still has impossible dimensions, but, you take what you can. But Mattel might have finally gotten the full message, and now Barbie comes in different body types and even different races, so that's great. He for She, like I said, it's a great organization. I really encourage men to join up. It doesn't cost anything, but it has global implications. It's a global movement. And I don't know if this was a direct result of He for She, but Sheryl Sandberg recently tweeted an ad in India. It's a laundry detergent ad, and I don't have it with me here, but you can YouTube it. And it basically shatters gender stereotypes in terms of housework. So that's great progress. And then there's the rise of Goldie Blocks. For those of you who don't know, it's a toy company started by a female engineer to get young girls interested in engineering. So if you're thinking about presents for young girls, go to Toys R Us and grab you some Goldie Blocks. So, in conclusion, I want to end on a positive but also somewhat realistic note, which is that right now when we look at the landscape of tech and leadership, we're seeing something like this. And for any women listening right now, it is still going to be an uphill battle because gender biases at an unconscious level is a really difficult problem to solve because we're talking about people who probably don't think of themselves as sexist or having any kind of gender bias, but they have it at an unconscious level. So it's still going to be tough in the workplace, when getting promoted, moving up in the world. But the positive note that I want to end on is that if we all keep working hard to shatter these gender stereotypes, then the next generation of girls, when they're thinking about their future and their careers, when they look at the landscape, they might see something more like this. And I really believe that we can achieve that. So that's it. Thank you very much for tuning in. I think Ree's going to field some questions, so I'll hand this back over to her.
So thank you very much. I actually got a couple of messages from a couple of friends during this session. They were like, "That video makes me mad," and I understand why it did. They frustrated me as well. So actually, if you guys have any questions, you can go ahead and type those in. I had somebody ask when I would be taking questions, but as of right now, I don't have any. Haz, will you be making? Can we put this slide deck up on our webpage?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, right now it's a PowerPoint slide, but you can go over to my GitHub and pull it down and do whatever you want with it. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Great. So I'll make sure this is available up on the webpage for anybody who, for anyone who wants it. So how many times do you think you've given a presentation like this?
This will be the 5th time. Yeah, I gave it to DevUp, I gave it to the United Nations Association of Kansas City. I even presented it to a high school. I was invited to go present it to Casey Feminist Club at, now I'm forgetting, Shawnee Mission High School. So yeah, that was really a good experience as well.
I'm just, okay, so.
Did the videos play okay? I knew it was risky to do video over a webinar.
So the videos played well for me. I did have a couple of comments that said they could hear the sound fine, but that the video was choppy, but that they thought it was probably.
Yeah, I figured as much. I should have started the talk kind of warning people that they were going to get choppy video.
Yeah. Someone asks, what is the link? Was that Amanda that asked? What is the link for the presentation?
I'll type it into the chat here. Let's see. Apparently, I can only chat to organizers and panelists.
It said, and I don't even see it.
If you make me presenter again, I still have the slide up that has the.
There you go. Pause.
Okay. There you go. So if you go there, there's a directory called Talks, and that's where you can find it. In fact, I can probably go to it.
So I have, while you're doing that, I'm going to ask a question here. Amanda Crisp asks, which really came first, the thought that a geek persona is male or the geek persona after geeks were male? That's a hilarious question, actually.
The thought that the geek persona is male, or say again? I'm sorry.
So she asks, what really came first? The thought that the geek persona is a male, or did the geek persona start to exist after men became what we call a geek? I mean, once men got involved into IT, is that when it transitioned into a...
You know, if you ask me, I think yes, because, you know, in the 1960s, or even the 1940s, there were a lot of female programmers. And I think as more men started to go into that field, that's kind of where they sort of started edging out women. And I'm going to go with that. I think that men created the geek persona of being a male field. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. And Letitia has asked, what are ways educators can encourage girls to get involved in STEM?
Yeah, so when I gave the talk at the high school, I was really encouraged to find out that their computer science program was actually half and half girls and half boys. And I think that educators really make a very conscious effort to maybe hold, you know, after-school programs like exclusively for girls. and also to refer girls to some of those groups that I talked about, like Coder Dojo in Kansas City, or Girls Who Code. And at a college level, it's kind of difficult. When I was in college, the undergraduate classes, the first one was kind of half and half, and then by the second one, it was like almost all women who already left. I honestly don't know the best way to have like computer science retention or STEM retention in that sense, other than professors making sure that they treat female students equally as male students. I think that just from simple things like if a girl asks a question, is the response kind of mansplained, or do you treat a woman who asks a question or a girl who asks a question in science with the understanding that she's a smart person and can understand it? So that's, I guess, some things that educators can do.
Someone else has asked if you cite your sources for your slides.
I actually don't, and I do need to do that. I will upload an updated version that has citations.
Awesome, great, thank you. And Rose says, I was amazed by the gender bias demonstrated by the resumes presented, just changing the names. She asks, who did that study, and do you know of any similar studies demonstrating that level of bias?
Let me pull up the PowerPoint slide. I don't want to butcher their names either. There were some interesting names. All right. There we go. All right, so the 1999 study was the first one that I showed, and that was Steinpress, Anders, and Ritzke. If my German is any good. Assuming that's German. I don't even know. And then the lab manager study was the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 2012. And it's called Science Faculty's Subtle Gender Biases Favor Male Students. And then the police chief's one was a 2005 study, Ullman and Cohen. In fact, I have all that research here. Let's see. So this is the... Which one is this one? This is the lab manager one. That one? Well, I don't know why it's taking that long. Long story short, I don't have a list of additional, at least I don't have it at the top of my head, but I did a lot of research on this. Let's see, which one's this one? Oh, so this is a report by the Department of Commerce on STEM jobs and the gender inequality as far as participation. Here we go. So this is the one on the lab manager position. So yeah, you can take a look at these studies. Maybe I'll provide a link to these studies as part of the PowerPoint at the end.
Awesome. So I think you have answered all of the questions. Several people are just saying thank you very much. They clearly feel the same way about this that I do, in the same way that Kathy Kellenberger did when she said, you've got to see this. So again, thank you so much. We appreciate it. I'm going to take the screen back really quickly. And just wrap up. The Past WIT now has a YouTube page, so presentations are available there. Our webpage, wit.sequelpass.org, is there. If you're a member of the Sequel Pass organization, make sure you go to My Chapters from your homepage and look up virtual chapters. There are tons of other virtual chapters that you can join. Several of the presentations that I showed, upcoming webinars presented by women, are virtual chapters, both professional dev and DBA fundamentals. If you join the WIT virtual chapter, you'll be put on our mailing list. You'll get our monthly newsletters with links to great articles, different stories, studies that are in the media, that kind of thing. And of course, you can always follow us on Twitter at @PassWit, or follow and use the PassWit hashtag. Let me encourage all of you on this webinar today that are on Twitter to use the PassWit hashtag. When you read something that's interesting, or even when you had a triumph at work, I encourage other women use the PassWit hashtag. So I know it's a small way to get involved, but it matters. I follow it in my tweet deck. I have it just on a constant stream. It's a way to remind myself that there are plenty of other women out there who do what I do, and that I'm not, yet again, almost the only female at the user group this month. So get involved any way you can. I even use the PassWit hashtag if you want to try to find a mentor for yourself. There's also a Slack group for PassWit. If you want to know about that, feel free to email me and I'll make sure that you get hooked up with that. I don't think I have any more questions at this point. So thank you guys very, very much for attending. And if you're on our mailing list, you'll get a notification for when our next webinar is. So thank you very much. Everybody have a great day, and thanks for joining us. Thanks again, Haz.